And it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Tom and Deneen Borelli.
Thank you. That's a nice applause. I'd like to thank Marlborough College for inviting Deneen and I to speak tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to discuss current events through a conservative prism. We understand our views may be a little bit different than the predominant views on campus, but we hope that through the open exchange of ideas, we'll all learn something new tonight. I'm going to discuss how President Obama is using big business, that is corporations, to advance his policy agenda. Through this strategy, Obama has altered the balance of power of special interest groups, and this change greatly enhances his prospects to achieve his political agenda. Our concern is that special interest group power dilutes the voice of everyday citizens to influence public policy. After the special interest groups take their piece of the American pie, all of us are going to suffer from higher taxes and reduced liberty. Deneen will discuss the Tea Party movement and shed light on its members and its goals. Then I'll close by describing how the Tea Party movement has the potential to break the cozy relationship among special interest groups and stop the growth of government and the loss of liberty. First, a little bit about us. We're in the front lines of the ideological battlefield in government today. We actively promote our views by attending rallies, shareholder meetings, radio and TV interviews, we write commentaries, and now thanks to you, we're on a college campus. Later this week, both of us, Deneen and I, are going to be speaking at the Freedom Works rally, tax rally in Washington, D.C. Finally, a little bit about me. My views were shaped by my life experiences. I never had an interest in politics. I was raised in a non-political household. My father was a World War II Union Democrat, a postal worker. My mother was a high school cafeteria worker, and she was a Republican. The story goes, part of our Italian family became Republican because of Teddy Roosevelt was kind to Italians when other people weren't, and we were immigrants. That's the story I've heard. I'll go with that. Growing up, I was interested in science, not political science at all, but life experience has put my career in a different trajectory. For me, working as a congressional staffer for the Democratic majority in 1987 was a life-changing event and put me more into the political world. Now to the body of the presentation. President Obama is tailoring his policy objectives to the short-term interest of big business. By doing so, he has transformed a formidable opponent into a powerful ally. Essentially, Obama has tipped the balance of power among special interest groups and to his favor. As we all know, special interest groups in Washington wield a huge amount of influence. But until recently, these groups have pretty much balanced themselves out. If you kind of look at this kind of a model, on the right-hand side, you'd have conservative politicians and big business, and then on the other side, we'd have progressive politicians, and then you'd have union groups and environmental special interest groups. And basically, these two groups have kind of balanced themselves out more or less over the years. Under Obama, big business has changed teams and now shifted the balance of power to the progressive side. In my view, corporations are really the key to public policy. The role big business plays in politics is well known, I think, in progressive circles, and not as greatly appreciated in conservative circles. I believe our community active president is well versed in harnessing the power of corporations. And I just have a little photo here to depict that. This is actually a photo I found on the internet, but I believe this is when President Obama was teaching. And if you look carefully at the slide, you'll see he's got little boxes where he's got corporations, banks, utilities. I can't make out the last one. And it says relationships built on self-interest. I'm not really sure what President Obama was talking about, but when I look at that, I see a recognition of the importance of corporations in public policy. When you have all the major special interest groups on one team, you've tipped the scale of the balance of power and to the progressive side. Because everyday citizens have little influence over special interest groups, They have a diluted voice in government and public policy. That's why I'm excited about the Tea Party movement, because it has the potential to shake up the special interest group monopoly over public policy. Just think of it. The money, power, and influence of big business, coupled with the grassroots advocacy of labor unions and environmental activists, all pushing for the same goal. That's a lot of power. Within this system, the left side of the equation that I described really gets what they want. Progressives get a bigger government and more control. Big business gets short-term profits that fuels stock options and bonuses, and in some cases, pushes out competition. And the taxpayer gets to pay for it all in terms of reduced liberty and higher taxes. Just a moment, let's talk just a bit about CEOs. In a lot of ways, a CEO of a multinational corporation has more power than a member of Congress. Unlike elected officials, there are literally few checks and balances on their limit of influence on public policy. They have political action committees for campaign donations. They have significant resources to run issue advertising from the corporate budget. Or in some cases, like General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt, they have a media empire where its programming and its news division can be used to support a president and his public policy objectives. Now let's look at a few of the examples of Obama's big business strategy. Obama's healthcare victory was propelled by his drug industry support for his plan. In my view, drug company support for Obama's plan is responsible for its passage. Indeed, it seems Obama negotiated more with big business and drug companies than he did with the Republican minority. Getting big business on Obama's side was the key for his success. First, Obama knows from history that, and current events, that the drug industry was going to spend about $200 million on the healthcare battle. Second, he realized when Hillary Clinton tried to do healthcare in 1994, it was defeated in large part because of drug company resistance. So getting drug industry on his side was key for his success. So what did he have to give in for that success? Well, to win their support, he really had to yield. President Obama had to yield to drug industry demands. So what was the deal they worked out? The industry wanted protection from its two biggest threats to its business: drug reimportation, that is the importation of drugs from other countries that are cheaper, and they wanted to shield themselves from negotiating drug prices with the government. Medicare doesn't want the drug companies don't want Medicare to be negotiated with drug prices. They want to charge whatever they want. For these favors, the industry agreed to give up $80 billion over 10 years, and it agreed to promote Obama's healthcare plan in TV advertising campaign. Now, partnering with special interests, especially the drug industry, was quite a turn for President Obama. During his campaign, he promised to change the special interest group culture of lobbyists and backroom deals. Ironically, Obama campaigned campaigned for allowing drug reimportation, and he also thought that having Medicare negotiate with drug companies was a good thing. That's what he campaigned on. Moreover, during the campaign, Obama made note of the revolving door of congressmen that become lobbyists. In fact, Obama had a campaign commercial that highlighted the role of former Congressman Billy Tozan in protecting the drug industry from negotiating drug prices with the government. And I have a little campaign commercial right here. The title was called Billy, for Billy Tozan.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message. The pharmaceutical industry wrote into the prescription drug plan that Medicare could not negotiate with drug companies, and you know what? The chairman of the committee who pushed the law through went to work for the pharmaceutical industry making $2 million a year. Imagine that. That's an example of the same old game playing in Washington. You know, I don't want to learn how to play the game better. I want to put an end to the game plan.
So can anybody guess who Mr. Obama and his administration negotiated with? The same person he was talking about, Billy Tozan, who is now head of the Pharma Trade Association. So how did the final bill turn out? It's estimated that the Obamacare will cost the industry $95 billion over 10 years, but that doesn't include all the new customers that the drug industry is going to get in because of the expanded coverage. The industry and its coalition played a key role in advertising for Obamacare. The Drug Industry Trade Association spent about $67 million on supportive TV ads since the beginning of 2009. And the CEO of Pfizer wrote a joint commentary, or a series of commentaries, with the head leader of the SEIEU union. For those keeping score, Obama, unions, drug companies got what they wanted, and the majority of Americans who opposed this bill were ignored. The American taxpayer now gets to pay for an expansion of an entitlement that will lead to greater deficits and lower quality service. Now let's turn to energy and cap and trade. The second example. Because of global warming concerns, progressive policymakers and environmentalists want to reduce our use of fossil fuels and cut back on emissions of carbon dioxide. Since 85% of our economy, or our energy, comes from the burning of gasoline, coal, and natural gas, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels is going to be expensive. Policymakers could choose to pursue an energy tax to accomplish this goal. Taxing fossil fuels, like an excise tax, would reduce consumption and generate a stream of income for the government. But there's a problem with this strategy. It's going to meet resistance of big business. So think of the equation: how can you get big business to join your team to lobby for it? The answer becomes cap and trade. Establish a cap and trade policy where big business will actually lobby for the regulation. So what's cap and trade? Under cap and trade, the government sets a limit for carbon dioxide emissions, and then allows a company that's over the limit to buy a carbon permit from another company that's under the limit. So there's a trading mechanism. It also allows companies to buy so-called carbon offsets. It's a permit that can be bought from an activity that's actually going to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So some people have this if you want to fly on a commercial airline. You can pay some fee and somebody's going to plant a tree in Brazil, and that pays for your quote-unquote carbon off, that's your offset. But cap and trade, in reality, what it does is it ushers in a team of companies that are now lobbying for this policy. Banks such as Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase and others want to make money from the trading of carbon credits and its offsets. It's been estimated that the carbon trading market would be larger than the oil trading market. That's big bucks. A coalition of environmental groups and corporations formed a lobbying group together. It's called the United States Climate Action Partnership. And they're lobbying together to pass this legislation. When you sit back and think of it, you have oil companies and coal-burning utilities together lobbying with environmental activists. Similar to healthcare, President Obama once again had to yield to business lobbyists to seek passage of this legislation. Originally, Obama wanted to have the companies buy all the excess carbon credits from the government via an auction. That is, the credits would be opened on an open auction and sold to the highest bidder, and the government would collect the revenue. But again, that idea met company resistance. So to pass cap and trade, the legislation was crafted to meet big business needs. The Waxman-Markey bill that passed the House of Representatives last year gives away, by some estimates, trillions of dollars worth of carbon credits to industry over the next 20 to 25 years. Now let's sit back and take an objective look at what the government is doing. By decree, the government is making carbon dioxide, a commodity, something that can be traded. But carbon dioxide has no intrinsic value. It's ubiquitous. It's naturally occurring gas. Unlike other commodities like gold, silver, orange juice, or even pork bellies, you can't eat it, you can't wear it, or even build with it. And what about the government policy to encourage a trading market in carbon dioxide? Again, just think about this for a second. If Wall Street could not manage the risk of trading mortgages based on real estate where land has real value, what is the risk associated with trading carbon dioxide? Obviously, in my view, there's great potential for a green bubble, fraud, and market manipulation. And in fact, in Europe, where they actually have a cap and trade mechanism, that's actually happened. So here's an example of a bank, JP Morgan, how they want to profit from these carbon credits, the offsets. They've jumped into the carbon trading market. According to Fortune magazine, the bank is planning to sell cook stoves to Africans that will produce fewer emissions, and then they will be able to sell these carbon-saved offsets to companies that need the emissions credits. So let me show you what JP Morgan's up to. That is a cook stove. And what JP Morgan Chase is going to do, they're going to sell that to our poor Africans, and they're going to take the credit for the carbon saved by not cooking over open fires. Now, talking about mortgage securities and talking about risk, how can you verify how many of these were sold? How can you verify these actually being used? Would you want to put your investments into a bank that's going to be trading carbon offsets based on a cook stove that's presumably being used in Africa? I certainly don't. How much money can the bank make on this? In the Fortune magazine article, they said, well, if carbon is $10 a ton and they sell 10 million of these stoves, they could make $100 million a year from carbon trading. Now you see why. They're lobbying for a cap and trade. Frankly, I find this, outrageous. Once again, you're gearing up bankers in a way to try to make a quick buck by trading through credits that are basically based on a government decree, and in my view, based on high risk. So where are we with the legislation? Well, a cap and trade bill passed the House, and now it's stalled in the Senate. It seems that Obama is trying to unlock the bill by making more concessions to industry. His recent announcement of offshore drilling and his recent support or newer support for nuclear energy seems to be based on drumming up more industry support for his climate bill. So once again, it's time to keep score. If cap and trade passes, Obama, some environmentalists, and industry get what they want. The American people get to pay higher energy prices, slower economic growth, and jobs being exported overseas. And then what about the environment? Well, it's been estimated the reductions from this Waxman-Markey bill is thought to have a meaningless impact on the environment. So once again, what you have is public policy being sold and dictated to the highest special interest group bidder, and it's not going to help the environment, and it's only going to harm the economy. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to Deneen, who's going to describe a little bit about the Tea Party movement, and then I'll come back to wrap up.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you again for having us here to speak at your college. My goal this evening really is to describe the Tea Party movement and how it came about, and to dispel any myths that you may have heard. Now, in my view, the Tea Party movement was born really from a sense of shock. Within a matter of months in the fall of 2008, we had a massive stock market decline, followed by massive government spending and bailout of major industries. Now, ironically, the companies that were responsible for causing the problem or were mismanaged for years were saved, while the government piled more debt on the backs of us taxpayers. Now, because of the economic dislocation, most Americans lost significant savings from their investments, and many lost their jobs. And suddenly, Americans' sense of fairness was violated, and they were jolted out of their political stupor. And for years, the American people assumed everything was fine, everything was business as usual. They were working hard, they were raising their families, and many just thought no news was good news. Politics was for someone else, not for me. Because of this series of events, many of Americans were worried about our economic future and the direction of the country. And they decided to get involved in the political process. The expansion of government propelled ordinary citizens to no longer sit idly by and to do something to make a difference. The launch of the Tea Party movement is credited to CNBC host Rick Santelli, who pretty much sounded the alarm from the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange on February 19, 2009. Now, Santelli was frustrated with the mortgage bailouts for families who could no longer afford their homes. And during what has become known as Santelli's rant, we're thinking of having a Chicago Tea Party in July, he said. And all you capitalists that want to show up to Lake Michigan, I'm going to start an organization, he said. And within a few days, nationwide protests, most put together at the last minute, emerged following Santelli's rant. This Wall Street bailout, mortgage bailouts, the auto industry bailout for General Motors and Chrysler, $1.3 trillion deficit, $11.4 trillion national debt, the expansion of entitlement programs. It's government spending our country doesn't have, while rewarding bad behavior for bailing out major industries with our tax dollars. Now, because of these fears, some citizens attended town hall meetings with their elected representatives, and unfortunately, their answers went unheard. They fell on deaf ears. They were dissatisfied with this experience, which fueled their discontent. Now, the Tea Party movement is a significant political force, and it is growing. An estimated 800,000 Americans participated in a peaceful rally in Washington, D.C. last September 2009, put on by the Freedom Works organization, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the speakers at the event. The movement is an independent grassroots movement. It's a rally with an amazing it's an amazing experience, The movement is an independent grassroots movement that doesn't have a primary leader or one primary group, which is one of the myths that has been put out against the movement, that there's one figurehead for the entire movement, and that is not the case. The main focus of the Tea Party movement is on fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free market. Fiscal responsibility, for the government to be accountable and responsible for how our hard-earned tax dollars are spent. Limited government, less government interaction in our everyday lives means individual freedom and liberty for us to do and make decisions as we see fit. And free market, it's liberty. It's the driver for free markets, which spurs creativity, innovation, and successful lives in America. So who are these Tea Party people? Well, the movement is comprised of ordinary, everyday citizens who want what's best for our country. They want to preserve liberty so that they and their children can enjoy freedom and pursue opportunities. The movement is made up of Republicans, Democrats, and independents, individuals from different backgrounds and all walks of life. In some cases, there are people who were never politically involved, and in some cases had never even voted. Now let me tell you about a couple of Tea Party leaders I have had the pleasure of meeting recently. I call them citizen patriots. We have Diana Reimer. She's 67 years old. She's from Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. Diana and her husband, Don, were never politically active. But however, a series of events, such as Don being forced into retirement, the market crashing, and their home losing its value, resulted in her call to action. Now they spend over 10 hours a day recruiting others and organizing Tea Party events. A key Tea Party leader in Pennsylvania, Diana, says she couldn't imagine not doing this. And then there's Kelly Corrender, 30 years old, an actress with a nose ring from Seattle, Washington. Kelly is credited as being one of the first Tea Partiers. Kelly wanted to urge her senators to vote against the $787 billion stimulus bill. She was frustrated because every time she called their office, the mailbox was full and they were too busy to take her call. So she decided to hold a protest, which drew about 120 people. 6 weeks after that, her next protest drew 1,200 people. And ever since then, more and more people have been getting involved. Kelly's story was featured in a front-page New York Times article recently. Diana and Kelly represent the core of the movement. And according to a new Gallup poll, more than a quarter of Americans count themselves as supporters of the Tea Party movement. And a recent poll by the Winston Group found that Tea Party supporters are pretty average Americans. 28% independent, 13% Democrat, 57% Republican. Not surprisingly, the poll found jobs, the economy, and the exploding deficit as the key concerns. Now, unfortunately, there are some politicians and the media who have injected race into the Tea Party movement by labeling its members as racists, rednecks, and extremists. This myth has been propagated by MSNBC and other news outlets. Janine Garofalo in her comments that Tea Partiers are rednecks. MSNBC host Chris Matthews claimed that everyone participating in Tea Party rallies were white when he said, and they're monochromatic, right? Meaning they're all white, all of them, right? Then you have politicians such as Charles Rangel, Harlem, New York. Charles Rangel said that you don't see any black folks at the Tea Party groups, ever, 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 ever. Or Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee, who said Tea Party rally participants are kind of without robes and hoods, and against any type of diversity. I can assure you, as you watch me and you see me stand here today and check anything I've written and talked about, the Tea Party movement is not racist. The Tea Party movement, this is utter nonsense. Anytime you hear in the media it is a racist movement. So anyone to declare the movement as racist is wrong. It's not about Obama, it's about the policies. So while the media is quick to propagate myths about Tea Parties, it fails to cover racial terms hurled out at black conservatives such as me. For example, I've been called a house Negro, I've been called an anti-Tom, I've been called a token. And I find all these messages all the time in my emails and on blog sites, online, anytime I'm on TV or on the radio. I'm targeted because I'm simply expressing my views for liberty. Views like Obamacare, climate change legislation, the Second Amendment, and pro-growth economics. So in closing, I hope I am able to shed much needed light on what the Tea Party movement is about. If you believe in liberty, and if you believe in self-determination, perhaps you may want to get involved in the movement. Please visit our website at Project 21 for more information, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Just a quick wrap up. So what can be done? We think it's time for the Tea Party patriots in the Tea Party movement to also hold big business accountable for their role in public policy. Going forward, we're going to be asking the Tea Party members to challenge big business when these companies pursue policies that undermine their values and our values. While elections occur in cycles of 2, 4, 6 years, Tea Party members can vote every day with their wallets. To kick off this effort, we partnered with FreedomWorks, another free market group, to run a TV ad campaign targeting John Deere Corporation for its lobbying of cap and trade. I'll just show you that little ad that we're running now.
Backroom deals in Congress are hurting Americans. Is your job safe? If you or someone you know works for a John Deere company, probably not. Right now, leadership at John Deere are working to pass job-killing cap-and-trade legislation that discourages the use of coal, oil, and natural gas. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that a cap on U.S. carbon dioxide emissions would cause significant employment loss. But the rest of the world is unlikely to join in on this massive job-killing gap. That puts U.S. workers at a competitive disadvantage. Is your job safe? Call John Deere's compliance hotline now. Stand up against backroom deals in Washington. Tell them management is violating its commitment to its employees.
Paid for by FreedomWorks and the Free Enterprise Project program of the National Center for Public Policy Research.
Backroom deals in Congress.
Once is enough. You got the idea, right? In closing, just a little point on the whole John Deere ad. What goes on is that these companies get these free carbon credits. They can keep them. move the jobs overseas, and then sell them in the exchange to make money. That's what we mean by exporting jobs. In closing, we thank you for your time, your attention, and your patience. And I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
You guys talk a lot about your partisanship not being part of the Republicans or Democrats, but I was wondering if there's any fear of being co-opted by the Republicans, because I know in Nevada, where one guy was running under the Tea Party banner, I know if you want a unified group, the Tea Party Express affiliates with them accused him of being a Gary Vee plan, and sort of just disavowed him from the tech movement so that it wouldn't split the trade for the votes for Republicans. I was wondering if there was any fear of being co-opted by them in that manner.
There's a lot of concern within the whole. Oh, summarize about he was talking about, I guess, the potential for the Tea Party movement to be hijacked by Republicans who want to take advantage of the momentum and then run using the power of the Tea Party movement. Is that where?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of, there's a lot of risks with, the whole movement in terms of it being co-opted, misused, mislabeled. There's been a recent website that's been put up by, I guess, people left of center who want to infiltrate the Tea Party movement and then make outrageous statements to kind of undermine the whole thing. Certainly some politicians would try to run and saying the Tea Party support, we're part of the Tea Party movement. But Tea Party movement's pretty independent and they're pretty vocal. So if a person's going to say, I'm for the Tea Party principles such that they are, they're going to be held accountable. And Deneen used the word accountability when we had our little meeting with the students. And that's one of the key things, I think, out of the outrage and out of the anger that's come out of this movement. People are looking for accountability. So I think some can try, but if they do, they're going to get caught. In fact, actually, a friend of ours, out of nowhere, a recent friend decided to run for the New York State Assembly, and they put out a little press release that he was the Tea Party candidate. And within 3 minutes, there were emails saying, you can't do that because the Tea Party movement isn't a political movement and you can't run on that as a ticket. So, it's something to be watched, but it's out there.
I was curious if cap and trade is not specifically the best policy for reducing carbon emissions. What is your constructive plan for reducing carbon emissions, but also addressing other environmental problems such as water shortages, pollution, loss of biodiversity?
Well, first of all, the whole notion of, cap and trade reducing carbon emissions is based that man's activity is affecting the climate. Okay, now I don't believe that man's use of greenhouse gases has affected the climate. I'm with a lot of other people who don't believe it. I think the science is somewhat speculative, and then even not so much the speculative part of it, it's the cost, the cost benefit, right? So even if it is a risk, how much resources are you going to put in to the world economy to do that? So there's a real important balance that if you're going to do a very, very expensive regulatory regime that's going to harm people's standard of living, how much science do you need? And how accurate does it have to be? And I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of the issues that came out with the ClimateGate emails and all sorts, but would you get a sense of a feeling of it that it's part of the global warming science is agenda driven? We know the goal, we just have to kind of figure out the answers to make sure it happens. The recent UN IPCC report, I think they had to retract 3 or 4 of its major findings, and this was the report that won the Nobel Prize. So there's a lot of accountability, and when you're talking about transforming the world economy, you have to be, pretty sure you know what you're doing.
How do you address other environmental problems such as water shortages?
Well, each one of those has to be dealt with, on a case-by-case basis. They said the cap-and-trade system has worked with sulfur dioxide. That's one of the ways it's been used, and I'm not familiar with that literature, so to speak. I heard some people say it worked, some people said it didn't work, but at the end of the day, it's a minor pollutant, compared to something that's a naturally occurring gas. So, there's orders of magnitudes different. But each one of these environmental issues should be done on a case-by-case basis. That lady is sorry.
Me?
Yeah, because you've been hand it.
So, first, I'd like to thank you for coming. It's pretty brave.
We do this all the time.
Awesome.
Well, not actually the college campuses, but we attend shareholder meetings, and sometimes attending shareholder meetings when you're the only naysayer requires,
No, I learned that. First, I'd like to say that one of our professors, John MacArthur, teaches a great class on climate change. I suggest auditing it. It's fantastic. But my question is this. You said you're all about fiscal responsibility, which is something that I knew coming in here, but something that I've been wondering and no one's really been able to answer for me is where is all this fiscal responsibility outrage when George Bush ran up a $10 trillion debt on 2 wars? Why was there no fiscal responsibility then? But now when we're trying to take care of our citizens with healthcare and stuff, now it's a problem where the money comes from and where it goes. Why didn't it matter when we were using it to kill people instead of save people?
That issue kind of came up in our discussion earlier today, and I think it's been kind of a time continuum. I think there were a lot of Republicans who were outraged over Bush for spending a lot of money. They really were. There were a lot of people that were turned off on a lot of what he was doing on the fiscal side. And I think why now and not before, I think you have to go back to what Deneen said about the shock to the system. I mean, everyday people who were basically politically inactive, all of a sudden woke up one day and their net worth was cut significantly, the home value was cut significantly, and that made them wake up. And we were hopeful that, really to get a democracy, in a republic effective, you need engaged citizens. So hopefully out of this, what we really want, I think what we all agree on is accountability. If you make a decision and if it doesn't work, you should be held accountable. And that's what we're hoping is an outgrowth from where we are today. I'm sorry, I was looking, okay, thinking.
What's your position on the Supreme Court ruling on corporations?
I'm sorry.
Is the Supreme Court?
Oh, the campaign finance? Yeah, campaign finance? Yeah, I'm actually, I think it's you're never going to get money out of politics. So even though, as you see, I'm not the big corporate fan here, I think as long as everything is open and transparent, it's fine as long as you have an engaged, group of citizens. If a corporation wants to, look what happened with healthcare plan or not. How many people really knew that Obama made the deal with the drug companies like that? So, next time around, if Pfizer's going to be, throwing $10 million into Obama's campaign, at least active citizens will know that and be able to connect the dot. More of these backroom deals. And the other thing with this, the healthcare issue, it was really a secret backdoor room deal between the drug companies and Obama. But what happened was some of the liberals in Congress were upset that the Pharmaceutical Trade Association was getting such a big deal, and they tried to get drug reimportation back in. And then what Pharma did is they leaked the memo from the White House to the New York Times and said, we have a deal with Obama. So a long way of saying, I think we're all better off with transparency. Transparency leads to accountability.
How do you compete with the corporation with billions?
Well, you're competing with them now. You're competing with them now when you just don't know it, right? The trade associations were running supporting ads for Obama. Most people didn't know that. So as long as it's transparent and is available, you're able to see it. Otherwise, they'll do it another way. That's just my opinion. It's not a perfect world.
Oh, yeah, a couple of things. One, that whole cook stoves going to everything. If I understand this correctly, The company can sell, sell those stoves to Africa for relatively cheap and then get the carbon credits and make millions of dollars.
Correct.
If I'm not greatly mistaken here, that sounds like it's become fiscally responsible to help feed people across the world in disenfranchised nations.
Well,
That just seems like a really good idea.
the $100 million was going to, first of all, it's going to J.P. Morgan's pocket, not to the poor Africans.
No, I agree. I'm saying that, it's become fiscally, it's become fiscally like good for, admittedly corrupt people to help people out. And that seems, if a government can make it, a fiscally, an idea that makes sense for money, like a really, powerful, rich company, admittedly probably a corrupt one, and actually make money by helping people, that seems like an amazingly good idea.
I would agree with you with the principle. If they could do that, that would. But in this instance, what's going to happen, just like we experienced with the same notion with everybody should own a home, and we ended up with a housing bubble. And this is, and this I think is worse because one, this market could be bigger. Two, again, you're talking about a gas. You're not talking about something that has a naturally occurring value. It's manufactured by government decree. So I see risk, and then how are you going to verify, A, that those stoves are being used? And they're being used in the right way. I mean, this is, again, just accountability going right down the line. Again, you can just see the meeting. Hey, I got a way where I can come up with a couple $1 million for the bank. Without thinking about the risks and the consequences associated down the line. I think it's right in front of me.
In the first part of a lot of the themes and a lot of discontent in American movements are discontent with maybe it's like big business kind of co-opting what we were supposed to be a government for the people and things like that. And I think that's been very strong in, we could say, left movement, strong right movement. So how does, and there's a lot of things with the Tea Party that I certainly can find common ground on, things like right groups, and if you want to use that idea that we're so used to, that everyone's either left or right.
I've been accused of being so far right that I'm left, so I understand it.
Right. I think there's a lot of things that could unite a lot of these groups together around, that people could come together around. So how does the, I think a lot of what you would call right-wing talk show hosts, I've seen guys like Beck associate progressivism and liberalism and Nazism and things like that. That's just very, how do you can't connect with people, especially with a place like that. And I think, how do you get comments?
Well, that's one of the reasons for the Tea Party movement is to communicate.
Can you reiterate the question? Sorry.
Hello? Okay. How to make it bigger and work together, is that what you're pretty much saying?
Yeah, and against voices like people saying that liberals are Nazis, like that.
Well, yeah, first of all, as I mentioned before about the name calling, which is unfortunate because really it takes away from the debate of the issue, the discussion of the issue. So really, what the movement is about is to talk about the ideas and the policies that are coming out of Washington and how they affect Americans on their everyday lives. And so people concerned about the position of the countries it was moving in terms of bigger government and a lot of spending and unemployment at 10%. These are the core concerns of the individuals that are in the Tea Party movement. So if you stick to the message points and what the core concerns are that are affecting Americans, that's our overall goal, to try to communicate to people who are confused about what the movement is about.
And there are people within the movement are frustrated that, there aren't more blacks in the Tea Party movement. And they look to Deneen and say, Deneen, can you go to the NAACP in Philadelphia and reach out to them and tell them about why you're doing this? But when when the lady from Pennsylvania approaches the NAACP, they don't want to hear it.
They don't want to hear it from her because she's white.
So,
to be honest.
But it is a goal.
But what I'm able to, really what's going on in terms of the black community, a lot of individuals are concerned about being different, if you will, concerned about having a difference of opinion. And so you have friends, you have family, you have people that are co-workers. I've had people, write to me on email or on Facebook and telling me that, I really agree with what you say. I agree with your positions. However, my family is all over me about, thinking that way or making those decisions or voting for this person. And so you have people who are afraid to be themselves, to be honest with themselves. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is that me personally, I was politically asleep for a long time because I worked full-time in corporate America, and I also went to school at night for 11 years to get my degree. So I didn't care about politics. I was trying to graduate, I was trying to work, keep my job, and keep my sanity, really. But another aspect of it is that a lot of black individuals are not politically active and they don't research the issues. In a lot of cases, they voted for color, for Obama, for instance. And so, when you have a situation like that, what we try to do is communicate to people the importance of doing your own research and coming to your own conclusion when you make your decisions.
No, right, no. Yeah, I think you are.
Could you compare the Tea Party movement to Pat Toomey's Club for Growth and how they differ or how they're similar?
Sure, that's actually a relatively easy one. Pat Toomey's, he's actually no longer doing the Club for Growth. The Club for Growth is a political action committee where individuals give that group money and then they give to politicians who are pro-growth politicians, low limited government, same themes, but as a political action committee. The Tea Party movement is hard to define because there's many in every different state. There's a few national groups, but some of them may be registered as political groups that you can give money to politicians, but to my knowledge, most aren't. It's more of a grassroots. It's not a get so-and-so elected. That's what Toomey's group was. Toomey's actually now running for the Senate in Pennsylvania.
The term liberty, was it me? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. The term liberty has been used in your speech a couple times now, and with emphasis on losing it. And I was just wondering what your definition of it was, or if there are specific aspects of things that we're losing.
One example I can give you is, because Tom mentioned cap and trade, one example about that is cap and trade is a tax on fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, oil. Obama said when he was running for president that his cap and trade plan wouldn't necessarily cause energy rates to skyrocket. So if you're in a position where you're going to have higher energy costs, we were walking around Main Street near the Latchkin Hotel, is that how you say it? A lot of small businesses up and down the street. So if you're a small business owner and your energy costs are going to go up, and you're well aware of what income you're coming in, what revenue is coming in on a regular basis, you have to get that money from someplace else. So for that example, you're not going to be able to hire another individual, you're not going to be able to reinvest in your company. Another example is if you're an individual faced with higher energy costs, say you're on a fixed income, the money has to come from somewhere, or you have to give and take from someplace else. Less, grocery shopping or take away from your entertainment. So that's going to take away from your standard of living. So that's what I mean in terms of liberty, your freedom to do whatever you're accustomed to doing, but unfortunately, you have this added tax because of higher energy costs. Sir?
I'm perhaps one of the few people here that have had the opportunity to live and work in Europe for 8 years of my life, and during that period, I lived and experienced national health insurance. And I can assure you and everybody in this audience that that is the way to go. Should have held your applause. I think that's that's the way to go, until you get sick.
That was good, I like that. I can learn something here. I knew I learned something.
I want full credit, especially if it gets on a ride.
He hasn't asked me back in a while, don't worry about a ride.
There's a lot to say about the Obamacare, a lot of which I happen to agree with. He didn't address it all, as you know, torture. In Europe, in a civil suit, the losing party pays the other party's legal fees. Aside from the political ramifications of introducing such a drastic action in the United States, why do you think he didn't address A, tort reform, and B, the monopolistic status that the insurance company
And the state government, yeah, I mean, the litigation side, which obviously leads to increase in tests, which leads to higher costs. And so you don't want to be sued. I mean, certainly that's a huge driver of healthcare. The other issue was you can't buy insurance across state lines. So that, you know, the companies have monopolies within states. You know, from our political perspective, that's where we would have started. And why didn't Obama do that? Because I believe he's, you know, a big government progressive. He believes that the big government is the way to go, the expansion of government, and this is the way to achieve that. And he had a lot of political help because he almost had a supermajority. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, I think he's being true to his beliefs from, you know, what I understand of his education and his, you know, his upbringing and his philosophy. I mean, he was the most liberal senator. You know, and it says a lot. You guys got Bernie Sanders, right? Right, so, I mean, that's saying a lot. So, I mean, given the choice, he wasn't going to, from his philosophy, I think, he wasn't going to go that way. He was going to go for the, you know, the big government way.
Hi there. Hi. Did you guys say you were pro-free trade? Did I hear that correctly? Or?
I did not say that, but we would be pro-free trade.
Okay. Don't you feel like that kind of is like this tragic comedy in a sense where you guys are pro-free trade, right? But you're not just pro-big business.
Yeah, it's
but free trade exists because of the big business. And what worries me about the Tea Party movement is not seeing this pro-free trade from an international perspective. I spent 6 months in Colombia. And it's a fucking disaster. It's a disaster. They're dying. And what happens with all of Latin America is that you had so many people who were farmers, subsistence farmers, who didn't have to be a part of the international, what am I trying to say, the international market. They could exclude themselves from that. But now, because of capitalism, pro-free trade, because of subsidized crops in the north, that, you know, that affects the whole region, they're dying. People are starving. Paramilitaries are killing whole families. And people who look like you, Denise, had the hope that Barack Obama would not be pro-free trade. And so what worries me about this Tea Party movement is that you are excluding all of the brown, poor black, and the poor whites of the world. And that you're only seeing it from this side of the world. And I tell you, I swear to God, it is so good here in comparison to everywhere else. And that's what worries me about the Tea Party movement.
Well, you know, subsidies are a bad thing, you know, but again, that's the special interest lobbying. You know, free trade is a great idea, but, you know, cap and trade, you know, if it's used just like, if it was be used in its purest sense, it would work. But what happens is it's not pure. It's like, you know, were we really running under the capitalist system? Well, you know, when the government's, you know, backing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and they're lowering it, have unfair pricing compared to other banks, is that really a free market? I mean, we live in this, we live in this kind of quasi-world. And I think, unfortunately, that's what happens when, you know, words are used like free trade, but it really isn't free trade because there's tons of subsidies. Or, you know, even with energy policy again. I mean, sure, I love free trade, so John Deere should be able to move their workers wherever they want. But not if John Deere is on purpose trying to raise energy prices here, which will disadvantage us here. So it's, you know, it's a complicated issue.
And what I'm trying to say is you can't be anti-big government if you are pro-capitalism. It totally defeats your whole argument.
No, I think what the problem is right now, we have big government and big business, you know, married together. And I think that's, you know, a big problem. That's our perspective. Yes?
I applaud your political activism, but I am quite in sympathy with your distaste for special interest groups and your distaste for corporate mechanisms now at work. But what was your epiphany to start to become a political activist? Because special interest groups and corporations have been around a long time. Was it the shock and awe of the market crash? Where were you before that?
Actually, all of life is an evolution. And actually, I became a shareholder activist in 2005 because what I saw big business doing wasn't good for shareholders and really wasn't good for capitalism. So, but you know, when you're only a few people, there's only so much you can do. So I was one of the, you know, few people that was actually from the political right going after corporations. I challenged Hank Paulson when he was running Goldman Sachs. We turned his shareholder meeting into quite a shock value for him because he had never been challenged before. He had taken Goldman Sachs money and he bought, you know, land in Chile. The size of the land, I think it was the size of Rhode Island for a nature preserve. And then he used Goldman Sachs shareholder money to do that. And it turned out his son was affiliated with the nonprofit group that got the land. So, you know, we stood up against Hank Paulson. Standing up against Goldman Sachs is really not a really fun thing to do. You don't find a lot of friends everywhere. But, you know, we all try to do our part. We're hopeful, and you know, with the Tea Party movement, that we'll have more people to get involved and get engaged in these debates. 2 more questions? Didn't he pick something?
This gentleman in red.
The prospect of a value-added tax looming on the horizon, do you believe if it passes that it will fuel fires for the Tea Party movement? What I understand of the value-added tax, excuse me, that as each piece of whatever moves through the system, it will be taxed at its stage of progress. Will that really add more gasoline to the fire for the Tea Party movement?
Yeah, I personally, I think it will, because overwhelming majority. I don't know anyone who likes paying more taxes. I have yet to meet someone. And so part of the issue that we are concerned about are higher, more and more taxes. So if this comes about and you have to pay more for goods and services, you know, how is that helping America? How's that helping the economy? So I think it will spur more people.
Yeah, that'll push, I mean, other things are pushing them over the top. Whatever over the top means, just be more and more people active, obviously. You know, with most, you know, forget what the polls were, but a lot of, you know, Americans are against Obamacare went through anyway on the 51 votes. You know, again, if they try value-added tax when people are already feeling they're taxed enough already, it would really propel them even more. But they keep spending. I mean,
Next question, right? In the back.
Me? All right. You guys talk a lot about fighting the corporate interests and about liberty. And an issue close to my heart is legalizing marijuana. And that would enable you to effectively fight the corporations, because there are huge corporations like DuPont and the oil industry that have a lot invested in making sure hemp isn't legalized for industrial purposes. You can also use it to make biomass fuel. And hell, it's a fun time, which also fights the beer industry and the tobacco industry. And I don't know, it feels like oftentimes whenever I light up a joint, my liberties are being stepped on by the government. And how does the Tea Party feel about the legalization of marijuana?
You know, I don't, you know, someone asked me a question about what was the Tea Party for more than just fiscal responsibility, free market. There's actually a Tea Party, what's it called, the contract for America, and it's got about 30 points. I don't know if drug legalization's there, but if not, you can just move to California because they're going to need the money, so they're going to make it legal.
The whole country needs the money.
Right. Yeah, so right. Well, if you have to go back, that's how they, you know, that's remember, tobacco was banned once in the United States in a few states.
So weird.
Right. So, even better example. Right. But it didn't work, and that's why I think over time, just be patient. I think legalization will happen, but it's not. I haven't seen it as part of the Tea Party movement. Well, I guess is that it? Well, again, thanks a lot for your time and attention.